Blog Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome to Around the Nest as we talk all the way through the Toronto Blue Jays minor league farm system. I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler, the voice of the Lansing Lugnuts. Over the course of this show, we'll hear from Rob Fay in Vancouver, Trey Wilson in Lansing, Al Hernandez and Tyler Murray in Dunedin, and Ben Wagner in AAA Buffalo. But we begin in AA New Hampshire, where they're about an hour away from game time, and I welcome in Bob Lipman, the voice of the New Hampshire Fisher Cats. Bob, how are you?
I'm doing well, Jesse, and the Fisher Cats are in Portland, Maine tonight, and we're going to play our big rival, the Red Sox AA, the Sea Dogs, here at 6 o'clock. You got it.
Before we even get to the Fisher Cats, can the Cats snap Mookie Betts' on-base streak?
How about that, huh? It has been a remarkable run here for the Sea Dogs second baseman. Just reaches game after game. He had one single in his 5 plate appearances last night, so we almost got him last night. We'll see what Deck McWhirter can do here, but it's been a great story for a kid that they took out of high school in Nashville, and he hit 400 for the month of April and was the Eastern League Player of the Month. I'm talking about Portland's second baseman.
Mookie Betts, I believe, last I saw 60 consecutive games that he's reached base. Okay, that's Portland. New Hampshire, looking at the starting rotation over this weekend playing at the Sea Dogs, you have Deck McWhirter going tonight. Scott Copeland receives the afternoon start tomorrow. We'll talk about Scott. Matt Boyd starts on Sunday. But first, with Deck, what do you expect this evening?
What I want to see from Deck night in and night out is just being consistent and not, making sure the mechanics roll right through. He's been in a nice groove since the middle of last season. Comes into play today with an ERA of about 3.8. And I tell you what, since Deck McWhirter arrived on the scene here in New Hampshire, Jesse, which was back at the end of that 2011 season, he's made every single start. Big guy, durable, and now getting the results. And let's hope it's a good one tonight.
All right, now to tomorrow's starter, Scott Copeland, because his last performance really caught my eye. So after an inning for the rehab assignment, there he comes out to the mound, and he works 8 frames, and it seemed to me like he made him look pretty easy.
He did make it look easy, and in fact, you almost have to read into the box score a little bit to find out how good Scott Copeland was in our 5-0 win over Binghamton on Monday. As you mentioned, Casey Jansen, who's still with us here in Portland, is going to rehab the next 2 days, tomorrow and Sunday, worked the first inning, and then Copeland finished up the game. 8 innings, he allowed 4 hits. 3 of them did not make it out of the infield, and he also induced 3 double-play ground balls in there as well. So Copeland has a 2.09 ground-out-to-air-out ratio. He's induced 8 double plays this year and really has been the most improved player, I think, since the beginning of the season for New Hampshire.
That's been very encouraging to see. Unfortunately for New Hampshire, they've needed all of this pitching because the bats seem to have stayed quiet.
Boy, is that I can't figure it out, and I know John Nunnally, our hitting coach, well, he doesn't have a whole lot of hair to pull out, but it certainly has been frustrating. No question. Right now we're 4 for our last 62 over the last 2 games. We were 2 hit on Wednesday. Henry Owens, the top Red Sox prospect, took a no-hitter into the 8th inning last night before Andy Burns knocked a double down the left field line that accounted for one of our runs. But just 189 for the month, and the Fisher Cats as a team will come into play tonight hitting at 218, and that's about 25 points lower than the 11th-ranked team in our league.
My gosh. And it's team spread. There's not 1 or 2 players you can look at and say we can count on them for offense. It's just contagious right now. So you figure they're slumping as a team, and maybe they'll break out of it as a team.
Isn't that how it normally goes, though? I mean, I know you probably watched what the Blue Jays did this weekend in taking the 4 games from Philadelphia, and hitting absolutely can be contagious. And, you just hope that, 1 or 2 guys start to go right, that lineup will come around. And I think our pitching's good enough to carry us, perhaps even to be a playoff team this year if the offense would just follow suit.
We're speaking with Bob Lipman, broadcaster for the New Hampshire Fisher Cats, AA affiliate for the Toronto Blue Jays. So the Fisher Cats are on the road for the moment, but coming Monday they'll be right back home. And what is coming up? What's on the upcoming schedule for returning on home to Northeast Delta Dental Stadium?
Yeah, Jesse, we're going to play all of next week at home, and that will start with 3 games with the Phillies AA, the Reading Fighting Bills. We have a little bit unusual schedule for our fans. Monday night we call it a chamber mixer. That's a 5:35 post. Couple of morning games with the Phils Tuesday and Wednesday. We get one of those treasured, valued days off in the middle of a homestand on Thursday. I imagine you'll probably find guys heading to Boston maybe for the first time or to come over to the New Hampshire Seacoast. And then next weekend, Binghamton comes in for their 3rd and final series of the year at Northeast Delta Dental Stadium. The Mets AA will be in next weekend.
I'm doing some quick mathematics about Andy Burns. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, is his on-base streak up to 16 or 17 games?
Yeah, 16 consecutive games now for Andy Burns. He had the double in the 8th inning last night. That was one of our hits. He had a single, one of our 2 hits on Wednesday night, and he certainly has been going, a little bit better here, and I think we all expected that from what we saw of Andy when he first arrived here at AA last year.
And then the players who have moved on from you, we spoke so much about how strong the starting rotation was last year. How much fun is it being able to keep tabs on, for example, Marcus Stroman rising up through Buffalo and making an appearance in the major leagues now?
Well, I think that's my favorite part of what I've been able to do here in New Hampshire, and I've been with the team since day one, and we've watched, I think it's 69 Fisher Cat alums over the 10-plus years have now gone on to play in the major leagues, and a good chunk of those pitchers who are with the Blue Jays right now, including most recently Marcus Stroman, has made it to the majors. We've got a few more, I think, who are going to be moving on here before too long. But that's what it's all about. I mean, we're kind of like I'm not going to say we're the elementary school teachers. We're more like the high school teachers here at AA. And
we've got the elementary school in the Midwest League, I think.
Yeah, you've got them there, and then we watch them move along through the system. But you're right, it's a lot of fun, and you kind of knew. I think back in the early days of the Fisher Cats, Mike Basso, as our manager, said, you'll be able to look and see, and you'll be able to guess most of the time which ones are going to be the ones who are going to be the major league players, because certain guys run faster, hit the ball farther, or they pitch better. And Marcus Stroman was clearly one of those guys who he's had to battle that knock on being a little guy. He's probably heard it far more than he wants to hear it, but he is all heart. When he gets out there on the mound, he gets batters out, and that's what it's all about.
Well, you started to hint at this, and then you mentioned a little bit again, those players you expect to move onward. And before we're joined by Ben Wagner of AAA Buffalo, I wonder if you could tell me the next players that Buffalo can expect to see rise up from the Fisher Cats as this year goes along.
I would bet A.J. Hernandez, who's catching here at AA, just coming off of, the health issues, he is one who is easily going to move past the AA level, and stays healthy, he's going to be a major league catcher. And I know the Rover Sal Fasano really wants Jimenez to stay behind the plate, and Toronto is stuck with that plan so far. He's really good. Aaron Sanchez, who went here last night, had a little blip. Mechanics kind of fell apart a little bit when he started to work out of the stretch. Is going to be a good pitcher. He's only 21 years old, and he's fun to watch him. Some of these bullpen guys who are hitting 93, 94 on the gun, who knows? Dustin Antolin has got great stuff. The lefty John Anderson throws very hard as well. So there are some who are going to be moving on for sure.
It's funny you mentioned Aaron Sanchez. Before we get to our question of the week, there was so much panic that I saw spread out. Sanchez has only thrown 3 innings. What happened? But you simply say mechanics, right?
Yeah, well, it was mechanics. And I asked, Rick Langford is in serving as our acting pitching coach here. He's a rover, usually the rehab coordinator. And he said that on many occasions now, the Blue Jays are going to stick with the organizational philosophy that when you throw 30 pitches in an inning, you're done. I don't know if that's a hard and fast rule, but with Aaron Sanchez last night, he threw 34 in the third inning, and that was it for him. And so I asked today, no ill effects, Aaron is fine, and he'll just be gearing up for his next start. So there's the answer to that.
And finally, the question of the week for New Hampshire Fisher Cats broadcaster Bob Lipman. What is the best defensive play you've seen this year?
You know, I saw it last night, and it was top of the third inning, and John Birdie hit a rocket off of the third baseman for Portland, Benesses. All right, this was a one-hopper that he kind of took up near the shoulder. The ball deflects to the shortstop, and Marrero bare hands and throws Birdie out. And you know how difficult that is. John may be one of the fastest, if not the fastest guys in the organization. And for Marrero, just to make that bare-handed stab and throw Birdie out a long throw was pretty impressive. So that's the best I've seen so far this year.
My gosh. Well, Bob, thank you very much for joining us. Until next week, best of luck.
Thanks, Jesse. Good luck to you, too.
All right, now let's go right on up the ladder. And from Bob Lipman, we are joined by Ben Wagner of the AAA Buffalo Bisons. Ben, how are you?
Doing great. How's everybody?
Doing just fine. Well, you've got the music at your batting practice. Meanwhile, we've got Call Me Maybe playing in the background behind us. It just changed to Sweet Child of Mine. Let's talk about the Bisons. First and foremost, the lead story about the Bison who's no longer there, Marcus Stroman moving on up to the major league. How did that news come across?
Well, I don't think it was unsuspected whatsoever, especially on the heels of a dominant performance in which he fired 6 nearly perfect innings, racking up 10 strikeouts while no-hitting Louisville. In an outing that he had already been briefed, his pitch count would be capped. So he had 80 pitches to work with however he wanted, and he used his final Bisons appearance about as brilliant as anybody I can remember using his final start, either knowing or not knowing that he was on the cusp of a major league call-up. I don't think it surprised him, although the news always comes as kind of a shock, and Marcus told the reporters as well. He missed the initial phone call. It went out on social media. Then his phone started to go crazy, and his mom and family were actually in Buffalo with him and saw Niagara Falls earlier in the day. So they were all there and able to celebrate it together, kind of as a post-celebration of his birthday that was earlier in the week on Wednesday. So it was definitely anticipated. You knew eventually in the course of this season it was likely to happen, and it probably will happen with a couple of the young prospects as well in terms of pitching at some point this season. But this one was on the clock, I think, really since he arrived in Buffalo. But the Bisons do have a pretty solid and veteran pitching staff as well. It's a major hole, not going to lie, but something that the Bisons were able to fill, and now we'll just kind of march on.
Before we talk more about the Bisons on the field, I know, looking at Bisons.com, that the inductees have been announced for this year's Buffalo Baseball Hall of Fame. Induction ceremony is to be held before July 11th. And so let me ask, how is this determined, and how was this received when the announcement was made?
Well, you know, the results are sealed and only audited by the accounting firm of such and such. Now, I'll say this. There is a committee made up of 8 individuals. Bison's general manager, Mike Wichkowski, longtime beat writer for now almost 3 decades. Mike Harrington is part of that committee as well. Duke McWhirter, who I have worked with the last 8 seasons, he's on the committee, and a couple other people as well. They round out, and you have to qualify. You get nominated, you go over the criteria, and it's over the course of a few months, you kind of whittle down who is eligible, who is up for discussion, who has been up for discussion in the past, and I think this year, with the opportunity for Bob Miskey, who is the Western New York native and a longtime supporter of the Buffalo Bisons and baseball across Western New York, and, of course, with his professional pedigree, it was an easy call for this for the Buffalo Baseball Hall of Fame Committee to go ahead and give him the nod, especially with the 50-plus years that they have as a professional scout under Bob's belt. Greg Tubbs was a player over the last couple of years. I know that's been up for discussion, just hasn't been able to get enough votes to qualify. And then the final piece of the puzzle is still the best winning percentage of any Bison's manager, and that is former Major League manager. Now you see him on Baseball Tonight on ESPN and in the broadcast booth throughout the course of the week, and that is, we're proud to say, another Western New York native now because he married a girl from Alden, which is just outside of Buffalo, when he was the skipper with the Herd, and that's Eric Wedge. And it's nice to have him in the backyard and kind of as a resource as well at the ballpark, but also it'll be great to see his plaque finally with an opportunity to hang in Buffalo.
So congratulations to Eric, congratulations to Bob and Greg Chubbs. They are the 2014 class for the Buffalo Baseball Hall of Fame. On the field, speaking with Ben Wagner, the voice of the Buffalo Bisons, a question sent in via Bluebird Banter. Liam Hendriks has been throwing strikes from day one this year. This is fourth year in AAA, but he's still really young at 25. So how do you think his stuff will translate once he gets the call to the majors?
Well, he's a guy that has had a small sample size of starts with not been able to take it up to the next level. He throws a lot of strikes, and that's indicative of the overall pitch splits that I was stunned when I saw it earlier in the week going into his start against Gwinnett. He throws now 71% of his pitches for strikes. A pitcher is usually giddy somewhere in the fringes of 60%, maybe up to 65%. That'll get rave reviews from pitching coaches in the organization. 71% of his pitches are thrown over the strike zone. He wants to not nibble. He wants to go right after guys. If it's a day that he's going to strike out 10, so be it. If it's a day that he induces 10 ground balls, so be it. He wants to work quick, keep the defense on their toes, and try to keep guys off balance. And he's got a deep enough repertoire as well. And you mentioned his age for being just 25 years old and already with some stints in the major leagues, likely to get an opportunity somewhere down the line. And he had a lot of turnover this past offseason in organizations that took an opportunity to get him off the waiver wire when Minnesota let him go. He was claimed by the Cubs, he was claimed by the Orioles, and then eventually claimed by the Blue Jays as well. But he's a guy that we've seen in AAA the last 3 seasons with Rochester rolling through and having these kind of performances against the Bisons. It's finally nice to have him on our side.
Just remarkable. Well, there was a player who got him his chance, but it was brief. It was a cup of coffee in the major leagues for his major league debut. That was Sean Nolan. And Sean was returned to AA. He comes up to pitch in AAA this year, and I know he gave up 12 hits and 4 runs yesterday, but my gosh, has he been good recently leading into that start? What is the difference with Sean? What adjustments has he made, and how has he grown?
Well, I've really enjoyed watching Sean Nolan work this year. He's probably the biggest and most pleasant surprise from 2013 into 2014. There are a couple of things that have led to his success, and all those hits and the bulk of those runs that he allowed kind of sped up a long 6th inning when he was on the hill yesterday in Gwinnett, capping a 25-inning scoreless streak that he had just pieced together, and it was unbelievable. One of the things that have made him strong is the fact that he is healthy, and he was healthy for an entire offseason, and there were no setbacks in spring training. Remember, a year ago, he had the pulled groin, and that sidelined him, and he just never felt really healthy. He didn't have his legs underneath him. He really credits a lot of his workout plan this offseason and the fact that he was able to get on the mound much earlier, build up a ton of leg strength, and then that has added to the little bit of the velocity that we saw as well with Sean. He's registered 96 miles an hour on the fastball, and he always hovers around, that 94 mile an hour range now. So that's really encouraging to see. And in my opinion, he's been a lot more aggressive throwing on the inside half of the plate. And when you're a lefty and you can run right at both sides of the plate aggressively, and he hits for strikes as well with 3 quality pitches, he's got the added velocity on the fastball. He's still got the curveball as well. It's been falling off the table and continues to develop as a pitch that really has guys off balance and diving out and reaching out after because they have to get the bat started now because he's got those extra clicks on the velocity. They've got to get everything moving a little bit quicker. The changeup has been a really good pitch for Sean. So those are just some of the variables that have separated him this year versus where he was last year.
From the starting rotation to the bullpen, and you can point out to me if there's anybody that I'm missing, but I'm looking at the relief crew for the Buffalo Bisons, whether it's Bobby Korecki, whether it's, for example, the recently promoted up-to Gregory Infante, whether it's Ryan Tepera or John Stilson, and I see an awful lot of zeros. How does this bullpen compare to prior bullpens you've been around? I don't even have to mention Neil Wagner. I think he's a given right now.
Yeah, right. This is a bullpen that is outstanding, and I thought we would flirt with the success maybe last year when we had Neil Wagner Jeremy Jefferson, John Stilson, all throwing BBs at the same time. This bullpen right now has surpassed that. And they have just been not only very efficient, but very dominant at the same time. You throw Gregory Infante, who probably had too many nerves under him when he made his Bison debut at Coca-Cola Field, but after that first outing, he has been an absolute machine on the mound, throwing strike after strike. He hovered at 98, 99 miles an hour against Gwinnett his last time out on the hill, and that's where Buffalo just spent the last 4 days. So he's been a really pleasant surprise, and the guys like Ryan Tepera that we've been getting to know, both can go out as a one-inning stint, both can go out as a multi-inning guy. So, and then top it all off, Bobby Korecki, a wily veteran who has continued to hone in his craft, the development of the cutter, which is a pitch that he feels is working the best, and the results prove it. He's pitched in 13 ball games, has not been scored on in 22 consecutive innings. That's a lot of multi-inning stints, and what's maybe even more impressive for me, the first time that he had to go to the mound, it was when Buffalo was in dire straits. He had to really soak up 4 straight innings out of the bullpen, and he was unhittable. The cutter, it's not overpowering velocity whatsoever, but it's the thought and the plan that Korecki has on the mound, and it just rounds out a very complete bullpen for the Herd.
Lastly, before we get to our question of the week, I want to ask you about Kevin Pillar and the hitting streak. Now, he's been noted for hitting streaks in the past. His hitting streak while he was in college was historic. This one didn't approach that, but still, it's good to see Pillar hitting this year like he was hitting last year for you.
It really is, and the hitting streak is even more impressive of where he was physically and mentally at the beginning of the season, knowing that he just had to survive the first few weeks of the year. He starts off 1 for 24 at the plate. Take it a step further, he goes 5 for 44. That's a bad slump and a big hole for anybody to start the season in at the beginning of the year. And how do you get out of it? Well, you hit 400 for about 3 straight weeks. Your numbers go up rather quickly, and that's what's more impressive. It's not a vitamin-style hit streak where he's just getting 1 a day. It's much more than that. He's driving the baseball. He lost his 18-game hit streak the other night. First at bat, he hops in the ballpark at 10:35 in the morning. He's in the batter's box, and he laces a double down the left field line. That's the kind of approach that he's had. He's not passing on quality pitches to jump on, and he recognizes that he's not going to hit 12 to 15 home runs a year. He may run into a couple because there's hard-line drives that scrape over the wall. He's completely fine with that. I think he would rather have 25 doubles at the end of the year than he would rather have 12 home runs at the end of the season.
Finally, our question of the week for Ben Wagner with the Buffalo Bisons. What's the finest defensive play that you've seen this year?
If we would have talked last Friday, I wouldn't have had one. But thank goodness a week has passed and Ryan Goins is back in Buffalo, because he made 4 quality catches on one day alone that I had stars next to in my scorebook. But one takes the cake, and that was a soft, shallow fly ball to center field. Goins starts at second base on Sunday afternoon. He goes into a wind sprint back into his right into short center field. The center fielder couldn't get there because it was hit too softly enough, didn't have a lot of lift on it. It was Goins in a do-or-die play, but he looked like he was setting himself up for a pro day for the NFL draft. He was in a full tilt sprint, goes over the shoulder grab, sliding down on both knees, and makes a basket catch without hardly being able to pick up the baseball. It was a brilliant catch. It was early in the ball game, and it got the fans into it on a rather windy and chilly afternoon on Sunday in downtown Buffalo. But it really set the tone for what he was able to do not only that day, but how he has continued to not let any offensive struggles at the minor league level or at the major league level lapse into his defensive approach. It was by far and away the best defensive gem that we really have had this entire season.
Ricky Romero and the Buffalo Bisons play at Charlotte tonight at 7:05 p.m. They'll be back at home at Coca-Cola Field this coming Tuesday, and you can go to bisons.com for all the information that you need. Ben Wagner, thank you very much, and best of luck.
Thank you very much, Jesse, and thank everybody for Bluebird Banter and promoting this great talk show. I really love it.
Excellent. Let's go down from AAA Ben to now high A advance, the Florida State League, Al Hernandez and the Dunedin Blue Jays. Al, how are you?
I'm doing great, Jesse. How are you?
Well, I'm doing just fine. And every time I talk with you, it seems like I say, hey, look at that. Dunedin's winning some more games. I believe last week I got to say, hey, what happened? You lost 2 in a row, and now I don't even get to say that. Let's begin with Arik Sikula, because why not begin with the guy who closes, right?
We all love Arik Sikula. Lay it on me. What's your question?
With Arik Sikula, with the Lugnuts last year in the Midwest League, he was shut down. He was lights out, and yet it seems to me that at a higher league and accepting a higher challenge against better hitters, he's been even more untouchable. And so let me ask, when he comes out of the bullpen, do you feel like it's over already, or are you just enjoying the experience?
I would love to say I'm able to kick back and enjoy the experience, but he's been used more often at home than not. So when he comes out to the mound, I know I've only got a few minutes to wrap up everything and get back down onto the field for a post-game interview. So I'm in mad scramble mode. I'm thinking to myself, if Arik Sikula somehow ends up throwing more than 10 pitches, it will be a miracle this inning. So I need to hurry and gather my bearings. But when we're on the road, sitting back and relaxing and watching him could be the most enjoyable experience, or at least rival all the enjoyable experiences that I've had this season. He just goes out there, pounds the strike zone, and you know what kind of stuff he has. He relies on that cutter, which is so hard, jamming guys up in on the hands, and then he comes out with that devastating curveball. It's a bit of a strange combination, a pitch combination that we don't see too much, but I think that's what may make him so effective.
Excellent. Well, I was about to ask you for the scouting report, but there it is. That's what's made Sikula so good. And, I mean, I'd love to ask you who on this Dunedin team is going to get better as this year's gone on, and yet I'm looking at it, and I see improvement happening already. From Sikula right to the starting rotation, Daniel Norris struck out 10 in 4 2/3 shutout innings. Norris is recording the Ks. He's not allowing any runs. What's the scouting report on Danny Norris? What has made him so effective?
Daniel Norris has 3 pitches that just continue to get better with what seems like every single start. We'll start with the fastball, which is what he's known for. It sits in the mid-90s, usually topping out around 95. You'll see it hit 95 on the clock a handful of times. But it's got a lot of movement, which makes it so difficult to square up when a pitch is coming in at 94, 95, and it's got some tailing action. It tails away from the righties and into the lefties. It's just so difficult to hit. And then he's got the secondary pitch, which is his curveball, the big hammer. It's not quite as big and loopy as we've seen with Matt Boyd, but it's definitely got 12-6 action, still working on controlling that. And the changeup, his tertiary pitch, which is what has made him so devastating this season. Coming into the year, we didn't know too much about the pitch. Maybe you'd be able to tell us a little bit more about it from how he worked on it last year. But this year, it was a pitch that he sprinkled in there every once in a while, trying to keep the hitters honest. But over his last 2 starts, we've seen him rely more heavily on it than we've even seen him throw his curveball. The last time out with those 10 strikeouts in just 4 2/3 innings, and unfortunately, he had to be lifted due to his high pitch count. My unofficial pitch count of that ballgame was 82 for him. He was relying on it so heavily. He was starting hitters. Their first 2 pitches, he was starting with the changeup both times. Maybe throw in the curveball, and then all of a sudden you're down 0-2, 1-2, and he ramps up and throws 94 right by you. It's just unbelievable. And the pitcher that I compare him to, which I get a bunch of wide-eyed reactions, but is David Price, a guy who features the same 3 main pitches, a hard mid-90s fastball with movement, the changeup, and then the big curveball, left-handed guy. Maybe I'm getting out ahead of myself. I know Daniel Norris is still only 21 and still only in advanced A, but I see shades of David Price.
Is there anyone that you can compare Taylor Cole to? A comparison, or rather, a question from Bluebird Banter via SB Nation sent in by Pepper Leach. Taylor Cole is averaging 11.5 Ks per 9 innings this year. This number is quite a bit higher than he has ever posted at any other level. Is he doing something differently this year? What's made him so effective? So what would you answer?
Once again, this is my first year watching Taylor Cole, so this might have to be a collective answer between all of us. He relies on the fastball and slider mostly. He does mix in the changeup and the splitter a little bit, but he really relies on that fastball-slider combination. He just does a great job of keeping the fastball low in the zone to start at bats, not able to allow the hitters to square up the ball very well, and he just locates. We know that his fastball isn't overpowering, but when he has the correct combination of slider running away from the guys or diving in on the lefties and that fastball that he can put almost wherever he wants, it's devastating. I said adds in the changeup and the splitter, both basically doing the same job, making you think it's a straight fastball, and then the bottom drops out of it. So when he's able to mix those in, once again, to keep the hitters honest, it just makes it so difficult. Taylor Cole, a guy that doesn't catch your eye necessarily when you first start watching him, but the more you watch, the more you pay attention, the more you realize, man, this guy knows how to get outs and he knows how to throw strikes.
This is Al Hernandez with the Dunedin Blue Jays. Al, here are my recollections of Taylor Cole, and you can now contrast that with what you've seen. He was a changeup guy. He was changeup. He would try to use the changeup to work everything off of it. He'd throw a changeup, then a fastball, and then the changeup off the fastball. And we didn't see too much of the slider, maybe every now and then. There was no splitter. It was simply trying to get everybody out with his change. And it's so interesting to me to hear that now it's the fastball and slider and a splitter, which came out of the blue for me, and the changeup is getting spiced in. That, to me, that's fantastic and the evolution of a pitcher.
And I think that a ton of credit has to go to, and I know Tyler will agree because he loves Darryl Knowles, the pitching coach here, 9th season here in the FSL with the Dunedin Blue Jays. He's an FSL Hall of Famer, and he's just a key cog to this pitching staff. He's done a great job with pretty much every pitcher in the rotation and in the bullpen, as you can tell by looking at the numbers. So maybe he was a key to that transition on the mound, but it is humorous to hear that he used to rely on the changeup, sprinkle in the slider, and now it's the opposite.
Al, we have a question sent in via Twitter from an @Dunedin Blue Jays account saying, how was the beach yesterday?
The beach was hot. It was about 92 degrees. There was not a cloud in the sky, but it was a good time. We always enjoy going out to the beach and promoting, but it's important to stay hydrated and take a break whenever you need. We tried to do that, but when there's so many enthusiastic fans wanting to take pictures with DJ, it's hard to deny the people what they want. But I feel a little guilty complaining that it was hot because I know so many people out there are dying for any kind of warm weather. Even at this point in May, it's still cold places around the country and north of the border in Canada. But I'm not a Florida born and raised kind of guy. I was born and raised in Illinois, so I'm still trying to adjust to this heat.
Al, it was 89 degrees at the time of first pitch here in West Michigan. After we've had 40s and 30s, and everyone went from complaining about the cold to complaining just how darn hot it was. Here's your question of the week before we turn our attention to the Lansing Lugnuts. What's the best defensive play that you have seen this year?
It's tough for me to come up with an answer initially for that one because I'll say that almost every guy on this team is above average defensively and has above average range and makes so many plays that I know are not routine, look routine. But the guy that does that the most is Dalton Pompey, and he's the one that sticks out in my mind for the biggest defensive play of the season. We all know Pompey's history in the field. He had that fantastic catch for the Lansing Lugnuts last year. He won the 2013 Center Fielder Rawlings Gold Glove Award for all of minor leagues, and he came up with the best defensive play this season. So far for the Dunedin Blue Jays, it was in Tampa against the Yankees. And for those unfamiliar with George M. Steinbrenner Field, center field is 408 feet away from home plate and has very spacious power alleys. Well, Dalton Pompey spent that entire series robbing Yankees hitters of extra base hits. But the one in particular that stands out was crushed to right center field. I was worrying about it getting out of the ballpark, let alone somebody coming down with an out. Well, Dalton Pompey right away knew that he was going to get to that ball, jumped on his horse, chased it down, and had to leap at the last second, snow cone the ball. He had his feet come out from underneath him, so he was unable to land on his feet, and slammed into the wall and landed on the ground simultaneously. I was, needless to say, quite worried about Dalton Pompey out there, but he sat there for a minute, held up the ball, showed everybody he made the catch, and after a standing ovation, he finally got up, shook it off, and then continued at just making difficult plays look routine.
My gosh. Al Hernandez with the Dunedin Blue Jays. Al, stay cool, stay hydrated. Thank you very much, and best of luck till next week.
Thank you so much, Jesse. It's always a pleasure. I can't wait for Friday next week.
Beautiful. So that's Al Hernandez with Dunedin. And now let's go right on down the ladder and bring in Trey Wilson, the voice of the Lansing Lugnuts, along with me from Midwest League Action. Trey, let's actually start right up at the top. Let's start with your favorite defensive player of the year.
Well, Jesse, I think so far, we've seen the most highlight plays defensively out of Jason MiLB-leading, and I think he has made some absurd plays up the middle when he's playing in the middle infield spots. But the number one highlight play of the year has got to be the diving catch that DJ Davis made up in Appleton against the Wisconsin Timber Rattlers, into the gap, covering a lot of ground, laying out full extension, and saving a couple of runs, 2 out. Really took away a 2-out double or a triple that would have given the Timber Rattlers a couple of runs. And obviously that one made the top 10 plays on SportsCenter on ESPN. I think that's been the biggest one that we have seen so far.
We have some questions sent in for the Lansing Lugnuts from Bluebird Banter. For example, let's start with DJ Davis, because DJ is getting a lot of attention for a lot of strikeouts so far this season. And so the question is he making adjustments? Does he appear overmatched regularly? And are his strikeouts coming from any particular pitches?
Well, we'll start with the last one. Really, it's not any specific pitch. He looks off balance on a lot of different pitches. Fastball, breaking ball, they all have him looking pretty full up there sometimes. And, yeah, they're working on a lot of things with him. Ken Huckabee, the hitting coach with Lansing, has been spending a lot of time with DJ, as have the Rovers coming in. And we have seen some signs of improvement. We just haven't seen them translate day-to-day yet. Last night DJ had a 4-strikeout night, but the night before he came out and ripped a couple of hits and made some nice adjustments, taking the ball the other way. So they're trying to make him a multidimensional hitter, because he hasn't found that yet, and he's still young. People are gonna ride DJ about the strikeouts, and as long as he can bear it, he's going to be fine in the long run. I don't think that it's anything to be overly concerned about right now. You look at it on the box score, and I can see how it's pretty glaring, and it might be cause for some concern for a lot of people. But I think if you look at DJ Davis halfway through this season, it's going to be a different player. And if you look at him in a year or two, people aren't even going to remember this strikeout total from these years.
I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler, speaking with Trey Wilson. We're with the Single-A Lansing Lugnuts in the Toronto Blue Jays organization, and this is Around the Nest. We come to you every Friday. All right, so DJ Davis is still trying to find his own groove. Meanwhile, Trey, the rest of the Lugnuts offense is hitting 29 base hits total in each of the last 2 games combined. Who has picked it up for the offense? Or I guess you can answer that in the plural. How many guys have picked it up for the offense?
The short answer is all of them. It's been up and down the lineup. Everybody is contributing. Jason MiLB-leading had a great game last night. He had a 3-hit night. Matt Dean has been on fire the last 8 games. He's 13 out of his last 32. And he and Dawel Lugo both, when they're in the lineup, are destroying left-handed pitchers, almost up around a 500 clip against lefties. They're both just dominating southpaws. And it's still a smaller sample size early in the year, but we've gotten far enough along now that I think that you could say, okay, this might be a bit of a trend. Mitch Ney is going to consistently do what Mitch Ney does. We've raved about him every week pretty much, and nothing has really changed in that regard. But Justin Atkinson would have to be another one that you can't talk about how well this team is hitting and not mention Justin Atkinson. He's not starting most days. He's he's an every other day player, not an everyday player. He's getting some action here and there, but he's really been one of the most consistent bats on the team. He's been hitting over 400 over the last couple of weeks, and he's brought his season average up to 342, just taking advantage of the opportunities that he gets, playing in about really 2/3 of the games for the Lugnuts. And then Jorge Saez, who is playing not even that many, he's playing about 1/3, starting to creep up and get a little bit more playing time now. he's been on base all 14 games that he's played this year. So there are a lot of guys that are contributing, guys in the everyday lineup, and guys that are coming in when asked to come in and making their opportunities count.
Meanwhile, out of the starting rotation, there were a lot of folks who are very disappointed with the way that Tom Robson began the year. And yet, if you look at what Robson's doing right now, this looks like Tom Robson. What was the change, and how good has he been?
Well, I can't really pinpoint a specific change. He's throwing more strikes. I mean, that's really the biggest thing. He did not look comfortable to start the year, obviously. He came out, and his first 3 starts, Steve, was just looking – first 3 or 4 starts, he was just not looking like Tom Robson. And I think there were all the people that were disappointed to see that line. Nobody was more disappointed than him. He's a competitor, and he has taken a pretty devoted effort to figuring out what's going on and working with the pitching coaches. And he's throwing more strikes. He's still not right back to where we expect him to be, but he's closer to being that. We've seen some flashes of him being the guy that he was last season between the Appalachian League and the Northwest League that could paint both sides of the plate and throw strikes at will with any of his pitches. That hasn't quite been what we've seen with him this year, but it's getting closer.
And if he hasn't now become the ace of the starting rotation, it looks like Jeremy Gaboryski is. Gaboryski is leading the Midwest League in innings pitched, eating up innings every single time he's on the mound. Yesterday, again, he gave up 9 hits, but he only gives up 2 runs. There has to be a lot of satisfaction with how Gabby's looking.
Yeah, he did a phenomenal job in yesterday's game here at West Michigan, working himself out of some jams. Like you mentioned, he gave up a lot of hits yesterday. There were a lot of guys on against Gabby yesterday, and he found ways to get out of the jams, get ground balls, roll it up for a couple of double plays, and he hasn't been overwhelming, but he's gone out and been consistent. And I think after he had a bit of a slow start like some of the other starters did in this rotation, that's all you can really ask for. He's not doing anything too special, just coming out and getting the job done and getting ground balls and eating up a lot of innings. And the way that this season has gone with some of the short starts that the guys in the rotation have had, this bullpen has got to be getting taxed. So it's nice to see Gabby come out and throw 6 to 8 innings every start.
When the bullpen has asked to come through, though, there have been notable players who have. We spoke with Ben Wagner about the Buffalo Bisons bullpen, and we know what Arik Sikula is doing in Dunedin. But for the Lansing Lugnuts, it appears that the Lugs' answer is Griffin Murphy at the back end, taking over as the team's closer, and then in the middle relief and setup roles, there is Brady Dragmeyer for the long frames and Scott Silverstein in the 7th and the 8th. It appears that all those players have not only found roles, but they're pitching very well.
Yes, I agree with that. Scott Silverstein has been a little bit more hit or miss, but mostly hit, not being hit, but he's been coming out, and most of his times out, he's thrown very well. There have been a couple of times where he's been knocked around a bit and given up some runs, but that's not been the case for Brady Dragmeyer and for Griffin Murphy. Both of them are coming in and shutting games down when they need to out of the pen. Brady Dragmeyer has barely given up a run since the early part of the year. I think he's given up 1 earned run in his last 5 or 6 appearances, and that was in a 5 and a third inning appearance where he had to come in and really eat up some innings. So he's pitched very well. And Griffin Murphy has established himself as the go-to closer on this team to come in games. I mean, if you need somebody to get a quick 9th inning, it has been Murph since really the season started.
This is Trey Wilson with the Lansing Lugnuts, Midwest League affiliate of the Toronto Blue Jays, Single A. We've spoken with Ben Wagner in Buffalo, Bob Lipman in New Hampshire, Al Hernandez in Dunedin, and Trey with the Lugnuts, who are 16-17, about to play the second game in a 3-game series against the West Michigan Whitecaps. Trey, there's an interesting lineup evolution today going into the game. DJ Davis is not leading off. Dickey Jotham is not leading off. Instead, there is Derek Lovelace. And talk about a player ascending. Let's speak more about what Lovelace has brought to the team offensively and then yesterday, too, defensively.
Yes, he made a brilliant catch yesterday. That was another one I wanted to mention, actually, with your top defensive plays question. That was probably the number 2 catch that we've seen this year, over his shoulder, running back toward the right field wall, and he slammed in the wall, made a nice catch to take away extra bases from one of these West Michigan hitters. But he's now establishing himself as one of the better hitters on this team. He's hitting around 300. He's been mostly an everyday player, which I think shocks some people. I didn't think that when they saw him in this outfield lineup that he would be the one. But so far this year, he's been the one to come through and get on base when he needs to get on base. He's been able to drive in runs, extra base hits. He got 6 doubles and a triple on the year. He's been, I wouldn't say he's exceeded expectations, but he has come in and, you know what, I'll say it, he's exceeded some expectations after he really struggled at the plate last year with Bluefield. I know a lot of people were kind of wondering, is this somebody that can hit? But he has a swing that makes people that are fans of nice swings, makes them drool. So he, it's all starting to piece together for Derek Lovelace, and I think that this is not just a hot start like we saw with him in 2013. I think that he has made some changes where he can be a consistent hitter at the plate.
That's Trey Wilson with the Lansing Lugnuts. Trey, thank you very much for joining me.
All right, thank you.
From Lansing, let's go down to Vancouver, the 3-time champions of the Northwest League. Oh, they're about a month away from getting things going, but they're getting things all geared up. Rob Fay joins us now. Rob, how are you?
Well, we've got a nice sunshiny day here on the West Coast, which is a real rarity for us this time of year. So we're basking in the sun. We're trying to get those final preparations done to the field so that in June we can open things up.
How did the winter affect everybody in the area? We know it hit Buffalo hard. It hit New Hampshire hard. How were those winter months for you?
Well, they're actually pretty calm. I mean, I hate to be the bearer of bad news to everybody back on the east and down into the south, but it was just standard business. You know, that Pineapple Express kept it relatively warm. We do get our share of rain, which is just, par for the course out here in the Northwest, but just another soggy year, and, usually right around this time we start to wring out the towels for the final time and get ready for summer. So we didn't have anything as dramatic as you guys back in the Northeast.
Well, lovely. I'm on the Vancouver Canadians website right now. I'm having a look at your next top mascot, and I'm seeing you're encouraging the fans to give him a name. Here, take us through this.
Well, in the off season, every 4 or 5 years, some teams in minor league baseball like to refresh their look, get their mark up and, maybe sell a few more T-shirts in the process. So what we did this year is we really wanted to look back at the history of this organization. And if you look back into the mid-1950s, we were called the Vancouver Mounties. And a Mountie is a Royal Canadian Mounted Police unit, very famous for the big red serge and the hat and the boots that go right up to the knees. And I think we just wanted to play on that character. So we've come out with the character, which I think is really fantastic. Brandiose, which is a company that's done a number of marketing ploys for a number of teams in minor league baseball, took us on this offseason. And basically, we've got the character, we've got the look, now we just need the name. And we've gone through the social media channels to see if we can drum up some interest. And boy, it's been flooding in right from the first time that we pressed send on that project. So we should have a new name for our new mascot on June 1st, and I'm looking forward to going through the process.
Well, terrific. And this all starts tomorrow, so check out the Vancouver Canadians website. Maybe you can come up with the winning name. You're joined by Rob Fay, the voice of the Vancouver Canadians. So you've won 3 consecutive Northwest League championships entering this year. Everybody's expecting a 4th. There's just some sort of magic that goes on at the net. Let me ask you first and foremost, is there one of these championships stands out as sweeter than the other 2?
Oh, yeah, the first one. Nothing's worse than I think anybody that's broadcasting that's maybe listening in can understand. Nothing's worse than going into the broadcast booth of a guy who's won a championship from the year before, and he's got that nice shiny ring on his finger, and you think to yourself, man, I would love just one of those. And I remember I used to have conversations with Pat Dillon, a longtime broadcaster in Everett, which is a minor league affiliate of the Seattle Mariners, and we used to together say to each other in between innings, we'd lean our chairs back. There's just a small partition between the two of us. We'd be like, boy, wouldn't it be great if we could just get one of those rings? Well, he got one in 2010, and then I got my first in 2011. Little did I know it would be the first of 3, but I would think of all the great storylines and the Balbino Fuenmayors that came through in 2012 and the Marcus Stromans of the world, and I could name drop all day, but the first one, like many things in life, is the sweetest.
It's just amazing. So let me ask you, before we look ahead to which players will be joining the Canadians this year, from the players that you had with that championship squad last year, who are you the most eager to see how they play in 2014?
Well, it's kind of interesting. If I was to peg two guys, one, I know his trajectory. He's one of those guys you put in a lineup and they automatically make you better. The other one's kind of surprised where he's at right now. For one, MiLB-Dancler, I know that he was dealing with a bit of, I believe, if memory serves me correct, it was an oblique strain early on in the season. But he's made his way back into a lineup, and I don't know what the immediate returns are on LB, but he's just one of those impact guys, a fantastic situational hitter, and I'd love to see how he's challenged at the higher levels within the Blue Jays organization. I think he's just a player, really stoic, really quiet, keeps to himself, bit of an oddball in certain facets, but at the same time, just a guy that can play. A guy that we had in 2011, John Birdie, I'd like to see after his year in Australia what he comes up with. And a guy that I thought was going to project a lot, maybe, I don't want to say more meteoric than earlier, but just maybe a little slower than I thought, is Chaz Frank. Chaz Frank last year was our center fielder, and when I looked around, I said, boy, this guy reminds me of Andy Van Slyke, the old center fielder that used to play in the National League. I said this guy would go through the wall, and if there was a second wall, he'd go through that one as well to get to a fly ball. And, just to see that we might get him back this year is really a surprise to me. So I'm not sure if there's just a log jam at certain positions, if he didn't have the best spring training, if he's injured, I'm not sure, but I'm really surprised that the buzz on the street is that we may get a second look at Chaz this year.
I do think so. I think that there's a ton of competition for those outfield spots in the Jays system. They wanted to challenge DJ Davis, send him to Lansing. Derek Lovelace was playing great. Carlos Ramirez was sent back to Lansing. Marcus Connect was sent back to Dunedin. And it's been fascinating to watch how things develop. Matt Newman, who's been playing very well, sent back to Dunedin as well. So it's one of those spots where if he does come back, we know he's going to help Vancouver be one of the better teams yet again.
If he loses his southern drawl, I'm going to be really disappointed. I mean, catching a fly ball, that's all great, but he gives one of the best interviews around. So, if anything, from a broadcasting standpoint, I really hope we get him back, not because he'll just put the ball in play, but, man, he's a fun guy to be around. I think every team needs one or two of those guys.
What other players are you looking forward to seeing this year, and players you'll be seeing for the first time, you think?
Well, it's funny. From a marketing standpoint, if you told me that we were going to get a player named Rowdy, I'd be all for it. I mean, what we did with Balbino for a year and a half was, the stuff of legend. I mean, it's funny. We've had a couple of names already trickle in for the mascot competition that you mentioned a couple of minutes ago, and Balbino's name has been put forth as the name for the new mascot. It just goes to show you how much this city embraced a character like Balbino, and having the chance to catch up with Rowdy Tellez down at spring training this year, kind of soft-spoken the way Balbino was in his own way, but I can just tell right now, if he comes to Vancouver with this raucous crowd that we have and they see the name and we put his name up on the video board, he's going to be an instant fan favorite. So I've heard good things. John Schneider, who's going to be managing our team in the short season levels this year, has told me that he's got light tower power when he can get a hold of the baseball. So it's just be interesting to see if that translates here in a big ballpark like Nat Bailey. A guy that I've been watching from a distance is DJ Davis, the guy that we had for a cup of coffee here a little while ago, and I thought, boy, is this a bust or what? But you know what? 2014 comes around between him and Dwight Smith. I mean, the highs and lows, they come for every player, but there was a moment there where I was listening to some of your broadcasts thinking, boy, he's a real tough out all of a sudden, and then he put the defense into the play, and that's a guy that, even though he's not with us anymore, is a guy that I'd love to follow through and see if he can make his way up towards the higher ranks.
It's interesting, isn't it, how guys can change from year to year and even a month-to-month basis, what they're working on, how they're trying to grow, and you think you've got a player figured, and maybe sometimes the light bulb goes on and you have an entirely different ball player.
Absolutely.
We're joined by Rob Fay with the Vancouver Canadians, getting things all set to go, promotional schedule released. What's the countdown? What's the next big event on your schedule?
Well, the Super Saturday is tomorrow, and this is where we have our anthem auditions, and all the kids can come out and pick up their rookie team stuff. The anthem auditions are always awesome because you'll get the 4 or 5 singers that the second they open up their mouth, you're like, yes, yes, and yes. But you'll also get the 2 or 3 guys that you hope the media catches for the no, no, and no, because there's so. A couple of years ago, true story, we had a guy come on onto our field, and he rallied everybody that was with us audition. He's like, we need you to stand right here. And so he was moving people in off the street, out from the stands. Some guy ordering a hot dog, he wanted him too. Got them all together, and then scattered the American national anthem. And God's witness, I sat there and I said, you know what, I could live this life all over again. and never see something like that in my life. He didn't even sing it. He just scattered it. And I just thought to myself, I would let him through, but our staff took one look and said absolutely no. So it was cool. That's the beauty of an event like a Super Saturday is you get the little kids that come out and warm your heart, and then you get the old timer that walks in and you're just like, oh my God, how are we going to break it to this guy? But that's part and parcel of minor league baseball.
Where we go and where we are, instrumental anthems are enormous. Right now we're at the home of the West Michigan Whitecaps, where they have a trumpet guy who plays the trumpet above the crowd at suite level the entire game. He's got 96 tunes that he plays throughout, and you can make requests, and maybe he'll have a 97 or 98. Oh, my God,
that's awesome.
And the official score here plays the national anthem on harmonica. And I have his name badge right next to me, and it says score/musician. And you never know when he might just come on down there and suddenly take me out to the ball game, the seventh inning stretch. There he is on harmonica leading the entire crowd.
I think that's fantastic. I hope he puts his hat out and gets some tips as well while he's doing it.
Well, hey, it wouldn't hurt. And I think that this crowd, after the mood he puts them in, I think they'd be all too willing. Finally,
yeah, I can imagine.
Rob Fay yes.
No, I was just going to say, really quickly, just to shift gears, you asked me, and I thought about this in retrospect. One guy that I have to say, and I hope he's listening back in New Hampshire, a guy that we're going to miss this year is Jim Sikowski, our pitching coach who we've had here for the last 3 years. A fantastic human being, an amazing pitching coach. We were so thrilled when we heard he got the promotion, yet on the other side of our face, we're a little bit sad to know that he wasn't going to come back and try and help us for a 4th straight championship. But if there's anybody back in New Hampshire that's listening, we'd all in Vancouver like to send our thoughts and well wishes to Jim. Just a fantastic guy. We'll be getting a great replacement in Jeff Ware, but Jim was just one of those guys, a once-in-a-generation guy, and we're thrilled that he's doing so well, but he's going to be sorely missed this year.
The work that Big Cy did, with what I saw him do with Javier Avendano, or Eric Brown, or Taylor Cole, or Justin Nicolino and Noah Syndergaard, just fantastic.
And he's just got a really cool demeanor about him. I mean, he'll push you. He'll know when to pull back. He's got a real spiritual side to him. But more than anything, I just remember riding the bus with Big Cy for a long time, and the conversations that I would eavesdrop on that he'd be having with some of the names that you just mentioned, it was almost like a father figure. And, for a lot of these guys, I mean, they're either in their first year of baseball and their eyes are really wide, or maybe it's their second or third year, and they're starting to wonder if they've really got what it takes to get to the next level. And watching him in that delicate balance between the two just made me have such a huge admiration for him. So, no surprise that he's in New Hampshire this year and maybe even higher in the coming years. But, everybody asks me, what's the biggest change this year? Is it going to be new personnel? Is it going to be the guy, the pitching, the hitting? What's it going to be? I say, you know what? It might not be a guy in a jersey on the field. It might be the pitching coach on the side, because Cy was just, like I said, one of those once-in-a-generation guys that in all my years in baseball, I don't think I've ever met an equivalent.
Clayton McCullough, also no longer the manager of Vancouver, now an instructor of coordination heading all around the organization.
He's a bigwig now. He's a bigwig. He doesn't even change in the same locker room as those guys down at spring training anymore. He's got the white-collar job now.
Right. Okay, so Clayton McCullough, when he came to visit the Lugnuts, he was cold. He wore batting gloves. He still threw the best batting practice of anybody around.
There's zero surprise in that. And you know what the funny part is he got ribs because, he had that time with the Blue Jays up at the major league level. Well, he came straight from Toronto back down to Vancouver to coach our team. And everybody's like, what the heck are you doing? Like, we thought you'd be there for good. If you're throwing batting practice to Encarnacion, Jose Bautista, and Melky Cabrera, if those guys like you, you're going to stick. And he said, I want to come back and defend our championship. We just kind of all crossed our eyes and looked at him and said, yeah, right. But long of the short of it is, I mean, you know what? If you look at his age and the composure and the maturity that guy's got, I mean, that guy, the Blue Jays better lock him up to a long-term deal, because the day that they don't, somebody else is going to swing in, swoop him, and have one heck of a guy in their organization. So, the Blue Jays are very blessed, man. You look all the way up and down the minor league system, and there's a lot of great personalities and good human beings in that organization, and I really hope that translates to something at the major league level in the coming seasons.
The great Rob Fay with the Vancouver Canadians. Find him on Twitter, Rob Fay Nation. Meanwhile, Vancouver Canadians Online or CanadiansBaseball.com. Rob, thank you very much for gracing us.
Well, you call me great again, I'm going to get a complex here. But I will say this. if there's ever a time that I want to sit my wife down and try to, get her mellowed out after a great day, I'm going to turn on one of your broadcasts. I sit there and listen to you, and I'm like, man, if I had that manner in the way that I talked, half of this city be in the palm of my hand, man. So, Jesse, thank you so much for having me on, and keep up the great work.
Hey, you've got it. Rob Day with Vancouver. That does it for another episode of Around the Nest. My thanks to Rob, but Ben Wagner in Buffalo, to Bob Lipman with New Hampshire, Al Hernandez in Dunedin, and Trey Wilson in Lansing. I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler, wishing you well.